person. And my exploration of Indian myth, I'm no scholar, but it began quite by accident. I was asked to write the Mahabharat for young readers many years ago by Penguin, and it came out almost 12 years ago. And it has been, I'd say, the best thing I've ever written, because also the most useful, because I studied and tried to make the Mahabharat, this greatest of all epics, accessible to first time readers and to young readers. And in that, I saw more strong women than I have ever encountered in real life. They say whatever is there in life is there in the Mahabharata, and whatever is not here is nowhere. And the astounding range of strong women there, from Ambika, Ambalika to Draupadi to, it's endless. And then, and even as a child, I was told, oh, women should not read the Mahabharata. And I realized then that the reason was that they set the wrong sort of examples of what strong women were like. Whereas the women in the Ramayana, Sita was actually stronger than Draupadi, I'd say. She was a very tough lady. But the stories had been positioned and nuanced in such a way that everybody ended up thinking of Sita as a weak woman, a victim almost. This was supplemented by the serials that spread another phase of Hindu identity. And then I got deeply interested in Sita because I was in Sri Lanka for some literary reason. And when I passed that area, I thought I saw Sita sitting there because that's where she had been taken to the Ashok One, you know. And I saw her weeping. It's just a projection of a little image. And I thought for 1 month later, I said, why was she weeping? Of course, we knew she was weeping because she'd been captured by Ravan. But those Sita's tears hit me somewhere. And so we decided to do a book, me and Dr. Malishri Lal, called In Search of Sita. This was an anthology. And this book, In Search of Sita, which again came out over a decade ago, had a very important role to play in the way people began relooking their mythology. It's led to at least 10 more books on Sita, all looking at her as that strongest of women, the woman who left the kingdom, though she was not asked to, and walked through the forest, the woman whose dignity and impermeable sense of strength made sure that even a very arrogant king like Ravan did not violate her, but said, if you are ready to give yourself to me, I am there. But he did not impose himself on her. And then what happens to her? She comes back and she is given a series of chastity tests, and she returns to the earth. After that, she rejects the world which took her back. And right now, there is so much writing happening which is linked to ecofeminism and Sita and to all these things. I did a book on Radha, that other mystery, because where, except in Hinduism, would you find a goddess like Radha?
I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt you, but I want to just take a second on Sita as well, if you don't mind. Just this idea of, and actually maybe it's even broader than Sita, the idea of there being such powerful stories in the mythology that exists within India. And you look at, and again, forgive me if I'm going too far again in the direction of consumerism and marketing, but to some degree, I'm observing that today, if I look at the characters that are developed for screens and for movies and for comic books come from these Western comics books, Iron Man, Thor, all of these characters from the West. And you actually look at the characters that we have within the stories that exist in India. And I don't know if you think it's right or if there's a right or wrong in this statement of, is there an opportunity or is there a need or is there a chance of developing them as well into the superheroes and modernizing these stories to make them fit with the consumption patterns of content that we see today, whether it's, you know, things on video games or things within movie theaters that are animated or not animated or superhero films. Is there a world where they get modernized in some way? And is that good or bad?
Yeah. It's good and it must be done. But I find, and if you can excuse me from just wandering off the subject to be on the subject, But I think a lot would depend on the graphic presentation of these goddesses or feminine figures. Because if you go back to the early sculptures, they are gloriously free. They can show their breasts, they can show their bodies, their abundant fertility, their femininity without shame. Then with Victorian Moors, and the great genius of Raja Ravi Verma defined what Indian people think. We think of our gods and goddesses as coming from Raja Ravi Verma's paintings and the school of art that followed from there. And that was what, not in your generation, but in my generation, the little toffee boxes and the little tin canisters always had those in every level of consumering, whether it was the consumerism or marketing, that was the Raja Ravi Verma image or images, whether by other artists, but in the same Indo Victorian style. Then, when our friend Amish Tripathi, wrote his
Hmm.
Legend of Meluha, he did something extremely intelligent, that the cover of that book did not come from conventional Indian mythology. It came straight from the superhero trope. They were sort of these six whatever abs and big chested, uh, glinting eyes. They were a very different masculine interpretation of Ram in that, and of Sita, later of Shiva first, of course, of Shiva in his Shiva trilogy, and then in Ram also. Ram had biceps worthy of carrying those huge arrows, which looked like some strange, you know, archery contest high tech thing. And then he did the same thing with Sita. He did Sita, the warrior goddess, but it didn't work with Sita. I don't know why. He showed Sita as a sort of superwoman in the cover, and to my knowledge, people didn't buy that. They liked their old Sita with the shy eyes. I may be wrong, but this was the impression I got. But so if somebody was to do these stories again, a lot of the stories that come through in web series and all are not adequately researched. We don't pay enough attention to nuance and to research. So they look rather silly, in fact. And so, if more research went into it, and if a great number of two or three really talented illustrators and graphic visualizers could marry the elements of what people expect and what is unexpected into creating a modern, yet with a continuum with the past, version of these superheroes and superheroines. I think Indian people are longing to go back to their own stories and to learn from them.
Absolutely, and I think actually it brings me to another thought that you did some work in researching perfumes, I believe, also for the market and trying to understand what scents people cared about. And I,
No,
rather
no,
than
no.
me saying, I'll ask you the question.
No, that was not me.
Okay.
In fact, the research on perfumes was done by my co-director, William Dalrymple, who's very sensitive to the olfactory senses. But what I did was something different. I was a consultant with Chanel. I mean, as a friend of mine said, they must have been considering brand suicide to involve you with Chanel. And when I told this joke to my friend who was then the president of Chanel, she said, "Not at all. We chose you because we knew nobody would suspect you of trying to sell lipstick," which was a very good reply. But they set up a beauty training course in something called Mirabai College in Delhi, not in the Delhi University, but with government of Delhi. In their technical training program. And the first time I went there, we did this questionnaire to ask these girls about their concept of beauty. And one of the questions was, what is the perfume you love and remember? And this questionnaire is coming from Chanel, from Coco Chanel's company, from number 5, from all these things, number 19. And the replies made me weep, you know. There were two I remember, but there were many more which will come back to me. One of them said, "The perfume I love most is my grandmother's hair oil." And the other one said, "Krishna Agarbatti is the perfume I love most." And then, you know, these girls, that was, they were made, that was a different moment in Indian sort of recent social history. They were made as a class to go to all the malls and to go to the beauty counters and to try out perfumes, and they were given little samples. But so the olfactory senses also matter so much, you know, and we have such a deep olfactory tradition here, but it shows up in these areas of perfume and beautification.